When a man begins to create distance in a relationship, many women naturally feel the urge to close that gap. They may reach out more, try harder to communicate, or search for reassurance that everything is still okay. But sometimes, a woman decides to do something different. She matches his distance. Instead of chasing the connection, she gives him the same space he is giving her. This moment can be powerful because it changes the emotional dynamic of the relationship. When a woman stops overextending herself and mirrors the energy she receives, it often causes a man to reflect in ways he did not before. The silence that once felt comfortable for him suddenly becomes noticeable. The emotional space he created now feels different because he realizes she is no longer trying to fill it. In many cases, this shift sparks thoughts and realizations that were not present when he felt certain that she would always remain close no matter how distant he became. Understanding what may go through a man's mind in this situation can help women see the deeper emotional dynamics at play. Matching someone's distance is not about playing games. It is about protecting your emotional balance while allowing the other person to recognize the value of your presence. When a woman decides to match a man's distance, one of the first things that often happens in his mind is a growing awareness of her absence. At first, he may not immediately recognize what has changed. The shift may feel subtle. Conversations that once happened regularly are now less frequent. Messages that used to arrive naturally throughout the day become quieter. The emotional warmth that once filled the connection begins to fade into a calmer, more neutral space. It is in this moment that many men begin to notice something they did not fully recognize. Before, her presence had been playing a much larger role in their emotional world than they realized. In many relationships, the emotional rhythm is often carried by the person who expresses their feelings more openly. For many couples, that role is frequently taken by the woman. She might be the one who checks in during the day, asks how things are going, keeps conversations alive, and creates the sense of closeness that holds the connection together. When this energy is constant, it can sometimes become something a man unconsciously relies on. He may appreciate it, but he may not always stop to think about how much it contributes to the relationship. When a woman mirrors his distance instead of filling the emotional gap, the environment of the relationship changes. The familiar attention he was used to receiving becomes less predictable. Instead of messages arriving naturally, there may now be longer pauses between conversations. Instead of feeling pursued emotionally, he now experiences the same level of space that he once created. This change can cause a quiet realization to begin forming in his mind. The absence of her energy creates a contrast with what he was previously experiencing. Humans often recognize value more clearly when something is missing. When a person who once brought warmth, attention, and emotional engagement suddenly becomes quieter, the difference becomes noticeable. At first, he may simply observe the change without fully understanding it. He might scroll through his phone and notice that the usual message has not arrived. He might realize that conversations are shorter or less frequent than before. These small observations begin to create awareness. Something in the dynamic of the relationship has shifted. As that awareness grows, he may begin to feel a subtle emotional gap. The connection that once felt automatic now requires more thought. The silence where her presence used to be can feel unfamiliar. Even if he originally created the distance, experiencing that same distance from her side can feel different than he expected. For many men, this moment can bring reflection. He may begin thinking about the role she played in his daily life. Perhaps she was the one who brought humor into conversations, the one who listened when he needed to talk, or the one who showed consistent interest in his experiences. When that presence becomes less visible, he may start recognizing how much emotional comfort it once provided. Another thought that may appear in his mind is curiosity. When someone's behavior changes, people naturally wonder about the reason behind it. If a woman who once showed consistent attention suddenly becomes more reserved, a man may start asking himself questions. Did something happen? Is she upset? Is she pulling away? Has her interest changed? These questions often arise because the balance of the relationship has shifted. When someone stops providing constant reassurance and emotional engagement, the other person becomes more aware of the connection itself. Instead of passively receiving attention, he may now start paying closer attention to the relationship. This stage can also bring moments of realization about habits that formed over time. Sometimes a man becomes comfortable knowing that a woman will continue showing up emotionally even if he pulls back slightly. That comfort can make the relationship feel stable from his perspective, but it can also prevent him from recognizing how much effort she has been investing. When she stops filling the emotional space and instead mirrors his energy, that pattern is interrupted. The connection no longer feels automatic. If he wants the same level of interaction and closeness, he may realize that he now has to participate more actively in maintaining it. Another powerful aspect of absence is the way it highlights memories. When someone's presence becomes quieter, the mind often begins recalling moments that once brought warmth to the relationship. He may remember conversations that made him laugh, the way she showed support during difficult moments, or the feeling of comfort that came from knowing someone genuinely cared about him. These reflections can slowly shift his perspective. Instead of focusing only on his own space or independence, he may start thinking about the emotional benefits that her presence brought into his life. Sometimes people only fully recognize the value of something when they experience life without it. For women, this moment can be emotionally important. Matching someone's distance is not about manipulation or punishment. It is about protecting emotional balance and allowing the relationship to reveal its true dynamic. When one person constantly carries the emotional effort, the other person may not always realize the full impact of that effort. By stepping back and allowing the same level of distance to exist from both sides, a woman creates space for the man to notice the difference between her presence and her absence. That awareness can lead to deeper reflection about the relationship and the role each person plays within it. It is also important to remember that every individual responds differently to emotional shifts. Some men may quickly notice the change and begin reaching out more. Others may take longer to process the difference. But in many cases, the absence of someone who once brought consistent attention creates a moment of emotional awareness. At its core, human connection is built through presence. The warmth of conversation, the interest in each other's lives, and the small acts of emotional support create a bond that feels meaningful. When that presence becomes quieter, the mind often becomes more aware of what used to be there. For a man, matching his distance can be the moment when he begins to truly notice the emotional space a woman once filled in his life. The silence that replaces that presence can encourage reflection, curiosity, and sometimes even appreciation. And in that quiet space, he may begin to understand something he had not fully seen before, that the connection he once experienced was shaped not only by his presence, but also by the care, attention, and emotional warmth she brought into the relationship. When a woman matches a man's distance, another powerful shift that often happens in his mind is curiosity. Human beings are naturally wired to notice changes and patterns, especially when those patterns involve people who play a consistent role in their lives. If a woman who once communicated regularly, showed interest, then she was a good candidate for a relationship. And kept the emotional flow of the relationship alive suddenly becomes quieter. The change rarely goes unnoticed for long. That shift can lead a man to begin wondering what exactly has changed. In many relationships, routines quietly develop over time. A man may grow used to receiving certain kinds of attention from a woman. She might check in during the day, ask how he is doing, or continue conversations when they begin to slow down. These actions can create a sense of stability in the relationship. Even if he does not consciously think about it, he becomes familiar with that rhythm of interaction. When a woman stops overextending herself and instead mirrors the distance he has been giving, the rhythm of the relationship changes. Conversations that once flowed easily may now have pauses. Messages that used to appear naturally throughout the day might become less frequent. This shift interrupts the pattern he had become accustomed to, and that interruption often sparks questions in his mind. At first, the curiosity may appear in simple thoughts. He might notice that he has not heard from her in a while. Perhaps he checks his phone expecting a message that does not appear. Maybe he realizes that she is responding with the same level of space he has been giving. These small observations begin to create a sense that something in the dynamic has changed. Once that awareness begins, the mind naturally starts searching for explanations. A man may begin asking himself questions about why the interaction feels different. He might wonder whether something happened that he does not know about. He might think back to the last few conversations, trying to remember if there was a moment when her mood seemed different. These questions often arise because the human mind dislikes uncertainty. When something that once felt predictable becomes unclear, curiosity steps in to fill the gap. A woman matching his distance creates that kind of uncertainty. The emotional energy he once received consistently is no longer guaranteed, and that change invites him to start thinking more deeply about the situation. Another thought that may appear in his mind is whether she has started to pull away emotionally. If a woman who once showed interest now seems calmer and less expressive, he may begin wondering if her feelings have changed. This possibility can create a different kind of awareness because it introduces the idea that the connection may not remain exactly as it was before. When a man begins considering that possibility, his perspective on the relationship may shift. Instead of assuming the connection will always be there, he may start paying closer attention to it. The comfort of knowing she would always reach out or maintain the emotional closeness is replaced by a sense that the dynamic is no longer automatic. Curiosity can also lead to reflection about his own behavior. If he notices that her distance mirrors his own actions, he may begin to question whether his earlier behavior contributed to the shift. He might think about the times he delayed responding, the moments he created space, or the occasions when he focused more on his own priorities than on the relationship. This kind of reflection can be an important turning point. When someone becomes aware that their actions may have influenced the emotional balance of a relationship, they may begin to see the world through the eyes of the other person, and this can lead to a deeper understanding of themselves and their place in the relationship. It encourages deeper thought about how they want the connection to develop moving forward. For many men, this realization does not happen instantly. It often unfolds gradually as they observe the difference in the relationship's energy. The quieter atmosphere allows them to notice the contrast between how things used to feel and how they feel now. During this stage, he may also begin remembering the ways she previously contributed to the connection. Perhaps she brought enthusiasm into conversations, showed genuine interest in his experiences, or provided emotional support during challenging moments. When that energy becomes less visible, he may start recognizing how much it added to the relationship. Another interesting aspect of curiosity is that it can shift the emotional focus. Instead of passively receiving attention, a man may begin actively thinking about the relationship. He may find himself wondering what she is doing, what she is thinking, or whether she is still emotionally invested. These thoughts can lead him to pay closer attention to the connection than he did before. The absence of predictable interaction can encourage him to evaluate the relationship in ways he had not previously considered. For women, this moment can reveal something important about emotional balance. When one person constantly carries the energy of the relationship, the other person may not always recognize the full value of that effort. But when the dynamic becomes more balanced and both people give the same level of space, the difference becomes easier to notice. Matching his distance allows him to experience the relationship from a different perspective. Instead of always being the one who receives emotional attention, he now experiences what it feels like when that attention is not constantly present. This does not mean that every man will respond in exactly the same way. Some may quickly become more engaged once they notice the change. Others may take longer to reflect on what the shift means. But curiosity is often one of the first mental responses when a familiar pattern changes. At its core, curiosity opens the door to awareness. When someone begins asking questions about a relationship, they are already thinking about it more deeply than before. Those questions can lead to reflection, appreciation, or even a renewed sense of effort. For a man, realizing that the emotional rhythm of the relationship has changed can be the moment when he starts paying closer attention to the connection itself. The questions forming in his mind encourage him to observe the situation rather than simply moving through it without thought. And sometimes, those questions lead him to a powerful realization that the presence he once assumed would always be there may not remain if he does not actively participate in maintaining the connection. When a woman matches a man's distance, another important shift that can happen in his mind is reflection about her value in his life. Often, when someone is consistently present, supportive, and emotionally available, their importance can become part of the background of everyday life. Not because they are unimportant, but because their presence feels stable and dependable. When that presence becomes quieter, however, the contrast can bring their value into sharper focus. In many relationships, Emotional effort flows more strongly from one side at certain stages. A woman may be the one who initiates conversations, checks in during the day, or keeps the emotional energy of the connection alive. These actions may seem simple, but they play a powerful role in maintaining closeness. When those actions stop or become less frequent because she is matching his distance, the emotional atmosphere changes. The difference between presence and absence can be surprisingly powerful. When a man no longer experiences the same level of warmth, attention, or emotional engagement from a woman who once offered it consistently, he begins to feel like he's lost his sense of connection and intimacy. He may begin noticing how much those small gestures contributed to the relationship. The quiet space where her energy used to exist becomes noticeable. At first, this realization may appear subtly. He might notice that conversations feel shorter than before, or that the emotional tone of interactions has become more neutral. The laughter, curiosity, and supportive energy she once brought into conversations may feel less visible. These small changes can encourage him to think about what the relationship felt like when that energy was present. Reflection often begins with memories. When the mind experiences a shift in emotional dynamics, it naturally revisits earlier moments for comparison. A man may remember conversations where she listened attentively to his thoughts or encouraged him when he faced challenges. He might recall how she celebrated his successes or how easily the two of you shared humor and understanding. These memories can remind him of the role she played in creating emotional comfort within the relationship. Sometimes people only recognize how much someone contributed to their emotional well-being when that contribution becomes less visible. Another thought that may arise during this reflection is appreciation for the effort she once invested. Maintaining emotional closeness requires attention and care. When a woman consistently shows interest in someone's life, it communicates that she values the connection. If that interest becomes quieter, the absence of that care can reveal how meaningful it actually was. For many men, reflection also brings awareness of emotional support they may not have fully acknowledged before. A woman who listens, encourages, and offers understanding during difficult times becomes a source of emotional stability. When her presence becomes less active, he may start recognizing how much comfort that support once provided. This stage of reflection can also shift his perspective on the relationship itself. Instead of seeing the connection as something that simply exists in the background of life, he may begin seeing it as something that was actively nurtured by her attention and effort. Sometimes this realization can create a sense of emotional contrast. The difference between the warmth he once experienced and the quieter energy he now feels can highlight how valuable her presence truly was. That contrast encourages him to think more deeply about what the relationship means to him. Another important aspect of this reflection is that it may cause him to reconsider his own role in the relationship. When a woman matches his distance, the balance of effort becomes more visible. If he previously allowed her to carry more of the emotional interaction, then she could continue to carry it with her. He may begin recognizing that the connection required more from him than he initially realized. This awareness can lead to deeper thoughts about how relationships function. Emotional closeness is rarely maintained by one person alone. It grows through mutual attention, shared effort, and consistent care from both individuals involved. When one side steps back, the absence of that effort can reveal the importance of balance. For women, this moment can be emotionally significant because it demonstrates the impact of self-respect within a relationship. Matching someone's distance is not about withdrawing love or creating emotional games. It is about maintaining balance and allowing the other person to experience the connection without one-sided effort carrying it forward. By stepping back and allowing the dynamic to equalize, a woman creates space for a man to observe the relationship from a different perspective. Instead of receiving constant emotional energy, he experiences what the connection feels like when that energy is no longer guaranteed. This shift can encourage him to appreciate the role she played in building and maintaining the bond. Appreciation often grows through awareness, and awareness frequently appears during moments of change. Another powerful outcome of this reflection is emotional recognition. When someone realizes that another person has contributed meaningful warmth, understanding, and support to their life, it can deepen their perception of that individual's importance. The mind may begin linking certain positive feelings to her presence. Perhaps he realizes that conversations with her once brightened his mood, or that her encouragement helped him feel more confident during difficult times. These realizations strengthen the sense that her presence was more than just casual interaction. Reflection can also bring awareness of emotional connection that was previously taken for granted. Sometimes people become comfortable with someone's consistent presence without fully recognizing how meaningful it is. When that presence becomes less certain, the mind begins to evaluate what it once provided. For a man, this stage can be the moment when he begins to see the woman not just as someone who was always there, but as someone who added real emotional value to his life. The conversation, support, laughter, and understanding she offered begin to feel more significant. At its core, reflection about someone's value often arises during moments when their presence is no longer guaranteed. The quieter atmosphere created by matching his distance allows him to notice the emotional difference between having her attention and experiencing life without it. And in that reflective space, he may begin to realize that the connection he once experienced was not simply something that existed naturally, it was something she helped create through her care, her attention, and her willingness to invest emotionally in the relationship. When a woman matches a man's distance, he is said to be in her shadow. One of the most important realizations that can form in his mind is that effort must come from both sides for a relationship to continue growing. In many situations, when one person consistently maintains communication, emotional warmth, and attention, the connection can feel effortless for the other person. The relationship seems to move forward naturally because someone is always nurturing it. But when that effort becomes balanced and the woman stops carrying the emotional weight alone, the dynamic of the relationship changes in a meaningful way. At first, the difference may appear subtle. The conversations may become less frequent, the emotional reassurance may feel quieter, and the overall interaction may seem calmer than before. But within that calmness lies an important shift. The connection no longer continues automatically. Instead, it begins to depend on mutual participation. This moment can encourage a man to recognize something he may not have fully noticed earlier, that relationships do not maintain themselves. They require attention, interest, and effort from both people involved. When one person steps back from constantly sustaining the emotional energy of the connection, they can start to feel drained and need to take a step back to recharge. The other person is given the opportunity to decide whether they want to step forward. For many men, this realization does not appear immediately. At first, he may simply observe the change in the relationship's rhythm. But as time passes and the familiar pattern of her constant presence is no longer there, the responsibility for maintaining the connection becomes more visible. He may begin to notice that if he wants to talk to her, he may need to initiate the conversation. If he wants to maintain the emotional closeness that once existed, he may need to invest more attention and interest. This realization can encourage him to reconsider how much effort he has been contributing to the relationship. Relationships often function best when both individuals feel valued and supported. When emotional energy flows in only one direction, the connection can become unbalanced. The person who is giving more attention may eventually feel tired or unappreciated, while the person receiving that attention may not always realize how much effort is being invested on their behalf. When a woman matches his distance, she creates an environment where the emotional balance becomes clearer. The relationship is no longer driven by one person's constant effort. Instead, both individuals have the opportunity to contribute equally. This shift can lead a man to think more seriously about the role he wants to play in the relationship. If he values the connection, he may begin to take more initiative. This might appear through reaching out more often, asking about her life, or showing greater interest in maintaining conversations. These actions often come from a new awareness that the relationship requires participation from both sides. The comfort of knowing she would always keep the connection alive may no longer exist in the same way. Instead, he recognizes that the closeness he once enjoyed depends on his willingness to invest effort as well. Another important aspect of this realization is personal responsibility. When a man becomes aware that the emotional balance of the relationship has changed, he may start reflecting on how his previous behavior influenced the dynamic. He may think about moments when he allowed the woman to carry most of the emotional communication, or when he became comfortable receiving attention without giving the same level in return. This kind of reflection can lead to growth because it encourages a deeper understanding of how relationships function. Emotional connection is not something that simply happens, it is something that is created through shared participation. For women, this moment can be empowering because it demonstrates the importance of maintaining self-respect within a relationship. Matching someone's distance is not about withdrawing affection or playing emotional games. It is about ensuring that the connection remains balanced and healthy. When a woman consistently overextends herself to maintain closeness, she may experience feelings of anxiety, stress, and emotional exhaustion. The relationship may appear stable on the surface, but the effort behind that stability may not always be visible. By stepping back and allowing the dynamic to equalize, she allows the man to experience the relationship without the extra emotional support she had been providing. This experience can highlight how important her effort actually was. The conversations, attention, and emotional warmth she once offered may now feel less automatic, encouraging him to think about whether he wants to step forward and contribute more actively. Sometimes this realization can lead to renewed engagement. A man who truly values the connection may begin putting more effort into communication and interaction. He may reach out more often, show greater interest in her experiences, and become more attentive to the emotional tone of the relationship. These changes often reflect a deeper understanding that relationships thrive when both individuals are invested. When effort flows from both sides, the connection becomes stronger and more balanced. It is also possible that this moment reveals the true intentions of the relationship. When emotional effort becomes balanced, it becomes easier to see whether both people are genuinely interested in nurturing the connection. If a man chooses to step forward and invest more energy, it suggests that the relationship holds meaning for him. On the other hand, if the connection fades when the woman stops carrying the emotional weight alone, it may reveal that the relationship was previously being sustained by her effort rather than mutual interest. Either outcome provides clarity. Matching someone's distance creates a space where the natural level of effort from both individuals becomes visible. For a man, recognizing that effort must come from both sides can be an important moment of awareness. It encourages him to evaluate how he contributes to the relationship and whether he is willing to take a more active role in maintaining it. Relationships that grow through mutual effort often feel more stable and fulfilling for both partners. Each person knows that the connection is not being carried by one individual alone. Instead, it is built through shared attention, respect, and emotional investment. In the end, when a woman mirrors the energy she receives, she does more than simply respond to distance. She creates a healthier dynamic where both individuals are responsible for nurturing the bond. And when a man realizes that the connection depends not only on her presence, but also on his willingness to show up emotionally, it can become the moment when the relationship shifts from one-sided effort to genuine partnership.